At 4 in the morning on November 8, 2018, the most advanced frigate in the Royal Norwegian Navy was sailing home through familiar waters it had navigated dozens of times before. 137 personnel were aboard. The sea was calm. The night was clear. Visibility was excellent. 12 minutes later, the ship was gone. Not from enemy fire, not from a storm, not from any mechanical failure that a maintenance crew could have caught. The HNoMS Helge Ingstad, a $500 million warship, was destroyed by a cascade of 7 systemic failures, each one invisible alone, each one survivable in isolation, but together they sent a NATO frigate to the bottom of a Norwegian fjord. And the most devastating failure didn't happen during the collision. It happened after it, when the crew walked off the ship and left every watertight door wide open behind them. This is not a story about 2 ships colliding. This is a forensic analysis of how an entire military system, doctrine, training, technology, and human judgment failed simultaneously on a clear November morning. Layer by layer, let's break it down. To understand why the Helge Ingstad sank, you first need to understand why she was considered, in every practical sense, unsinkable. A Fridtjof Nansen-class frigate was designed to survive combat, real combat, missile strikes, torpedo hits, the kind of violence that warships are specifically engineered to absorb and keep fighting through. The Helge Ingstad was 134 meters long. She carried 8 naval strike missiles, a top speed of over 26 knots, and 137 crew members trained specifically for high-threat environments. She was equipped with the Integrated Platform Management System, IPMS, a sophisticated computer network designed to monitor every critical system on the ship in real time and alert the crew to any developing problem. And she had 13 watertight compartments, 13 separate sealed sections, each designed to contain flooding independently. You could flood 3, even 4 of them, and the ship would stay afloat. This wasn't just a ship. This was a system, a layered, redundant, combat-hardened system, and she had one final layer of protection. The Frigate Vessel Traffic Service, the VTS, a maritime traffic control center that monitored all vessel movements in Hjeltefjorden around the clock. Any ship entering the area was required to notify the center. Any collision risk would be caught by a human operator watching a radar screen in a warm room ashore. 5 layers of protection, 13 watertight compartments, a state-of-the-art monitoring system, 137 trained professionals. On the morning of November 8, 2018, every single one of those layers failed. Failure 1, the ship that wasn't there. At 0400 hours, 4 in the morning, the Helge Ingstad was sailing south through Hjeltefjorden at 17 knots. She was running dark, not completely dark. She was displaying standard navigation lights, as required by maritime law. But her automatic identification system, her AIS, was in passive mode. She was receiving signals from every other vessel in the fjord. She could see them all on her chart plotter, names, positions, speeds, headings, but she was broadcasting nothing. To every other ship in that fjord, to the civilian tanker approaching from the north, to the VTS operator watching his radar screen ashore, the Helge Ingstad appeared as an anonymous echo, an unidentified blip, a ghost. Now, this is important. Running AIS in passive mode is standard practice for naval vessels. It is doctrine. The logic is sound. In a combat environment, broadcasting your identity and position is a vulnerability. A targeting system can lock onto an AIS signal. The problem is not that the doctrine exists. The problem is that it was applied without context. In peacetime, in friendly waters, surrounded by civilian traffic, after a NATO exercise. Think of it this way. Imagine you are driving home at night on a highway you know well, and you decide to turn off your headlights, not because you cannot see, but because you don't want other drivers to identify your car model. You can see every other vehicle perfectly, but they cannot see you. That is what the Helge Ingstad was doing in that fjord. Failure 2. The forgotten warning. The Helge Ingstad had followed the rules. Before entering Hjeltefjorden, she had notified the Fridtjof TS of her arrival, 1 hour and 23 minutes before the collision. 1 hour and 23 minutes. More than enough time for an operator to plot her position on the tracking system and monitor her approach. The operator logged the notification and then forgot about her. When the civilian tanker, the Sola TS, departed the Sture oil terminal and notified VTS of her departure, the operator was tracking the tanker. He was not thinking about the 134-meter NATO warship approaching from the opposite direction. The Fridtjof TS had both vessels on radar at all times. The operator could have seen them converging at any point. He did not connect the two contacts until it was almost too late. The system designed specifically to catch this kind of situation, two vessels on a collision course in a monitored channel, had a human gap right at its center. Failure 3, the shore that moved. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Helge Ingstad, the officer of the watch was managing a busy situation. Two sailors were undergoing navigation training. A watch handover had just taken place. The OOW was young and relatively inexperienced, a direct product of a Royal Norwegian Navy that had been struggling with a shortage of qualified navigation officers for years, accelerating personnel through their career ladder faster than doctrine recommended. The Sola TS was a 250-meter tanker loaded with 625,000 barrels of crude oil, heading north from the terminal. Her deck lights were on, powerful floodlights illuminating the crew at work, as was standard operating practice. From a distance, in the darkness, those lights blended visually with the lit terminal she had just departed. The OOW and a trainee officer discussed the lights. Their conclusion, a stationary object alongside the shore. The tanker was, in fact, moving at approximately 9 knots, directly toward the frigate. Over the following minutes, the OOW made only brief use of the navigational radar. He had a chart plotter with AIS data, but the tanker's speed vector, which would have shown her in motion, was not interpreted as a threat. Confirmation bias had taken hold. He had decided what those lights were. Every subsequent observation was filtered through that assumption. 3 minutes before the collision, the pilot aboard the Sola TS called Fridtjof TS, asking what the unknown vessel approaching them was. VTS did not know. Then the operator remembered the Helge Ingstad. The pilot called the frigate by VHF radio, turned to starboard immediately. The OOW on Helge Ingstad believed the call was from a different vessel, one he thought was approaching from his port side. He still believed the Sola TS was stationary. At 500 meters, less than 60 seconds from impact, the tanker shut off her engines and called again with an emergency warning. 30 seconds before the collision, the OOW finally realized the lights were moving. He ordered a turn to port, then rudder amidships. It was too late. The collision. At 0411, the bow of the Sola TS struck the Helge Ingstad on the starboard side. The contact lasted 5 seconds. The Sola TS carried a protruding anchor hose pipe on her bow, a heavy steel fitting designed to guide anchor chains. As the tanker's momentum drove her bow along the length of the frigate's hull, that fitting acted like a mechanical saw. It tore a gash approximately 46 meters long down the starboard side of the warship. 46 meters, the length of 4 school buses, end to end. The gash sliced through cables, pipes, control panels, electrical switchboards, and, critically, through watertight bulkheads. It opened 2 of the frigate's 13 sealed compartments directly to the sea, the aft generator room and the junior rates mess. The ship immediately suffered a total electrical failure. 10 seconds of complete darkness and silence. The hidden path, hollow propeller shafts. Here is where the forensic analysis becomes deeply uncomfortable for naval engineers. The Helge Ingstad's propeller shafts were hollow. This is not unusual. Hollow shafts reduce weight and can carry lubrication or control lines internally. It is a legitimate, widely used engineering choice in modern warship design. But the generator room, one of the 2 compartments now open to the sea, housed the points where the propeller shafts passed through the hull. And because the shafts were hollow, and because the seals around the shaft penetrations in the flooded compartment were no longer intact, water had a direct internal pathway. Think of it like a garden hose pushed through a sealed wall. If the gap around the hose is properly sealed, water on one side cannot reach the other. But if that seal is broken, or was never designed to survive structural trauma, the hose itself becomes a channel. Water flows through and around it into the next room. That is what happened. The flooding did not respect the watertight boundaries the designers had built. It followed the hollow shafts from the flooded generator room into the gear room, and from the gear room into the engine rooms beyond. What began as flooding in 2 compartments spread to 5 or 6. 13 isolated sections. Hollow shafts connected them. The system that generated noise, not signal. On the bridge, the IPMS, the Integrated Platform Management System, was processing the collision's aftermath. It generated 564 alarms, 564 simultaneous alerts, each demanding attention, each representing a failed or damaged system somewhere on the ship. This is the paradox of highly automated systems in crisis situations. The technology designed to give a crew situational awareness can, at the peak of a crisis, completely destroy it. When everything is alarming at once, the alarm system tells you nothing. It is the equivalent of a building's fire alarm, sounding in every room simultaneously. You know something is wrong, but you cannot locate the fire. The bridge team was overwhelmed. They were trying to identify what had happened, assess casualties, restore power, regain steering and engine control, all while managing 564 simultaneous system alerts on their screens. And they were doing it without a Voyage data recorder, without a black box, because the Royal Norwegian Navy had not installed one aboard the Helge Ingstad. The investigation that followed would be forced to reconstruct events from memory, radio logs, and physical evidence. The damage control failure. In the minutes after the collision, the ship was flooding, but she was not yet lost. Even with 5 or 6 compartments compromised, there was still sufficient buoyancy in the forward sections to keep the Helge Ingstad afloat, if those forward compartments remained sealed. Below decks, the crew was awake and terrified. Junior rates in the flooded mess had been thrown from their bunks into rising water. Officers were trapped in partially flooded cabins. Personnel were sent to inspect the lower compartments and report back. But communication between the bridge and the machinery control room, which also served as the ship's damage control headquarters, had been severely disrupted. The flooding and cable damage had severed key communication pathways. Reports came back incomplete and delayed. The IPMS's 564 alarms did not clearly prioritize which compartments were flooding in sequence. The ship's stability calculator, which the Norwegian Navy had previously assessed as not fully fit for purpose, was consulted. It indicated that losing a 4th compartment would make the ship dangerously unstable. Then came the report: water flooding into the gear room through the hollow propeller shafts. The command team concluded 5 to 6 compartments lost, capsize risk, abandon ship, the open doors. Before abandoning the vessel, there was a discussion on the bridge. Should a small team go back down to deck 2 and close the forward watertight hatches and doors? The marine engineering officer assessed the risk, going back into a listing, partially flooded warship in the dark. He concluded, too dangerous. The order was given: abandon ship. All 137 personnel evacuated in an orderly manner. The captain was the last to leave, at 0632. Tugs had arrived and were attempting to hold the Helge Ingstad against the rocks. Steel hawsers were secured to prevent the wreck from sliding into deeper water. But the watertight hatches, the doors separating the flooded aft sections from the intact forward sections, were open. Post-incident investigation confirmed that the vast majority of watertight bulkheads and hatches were left in an open position when the crew abandoned ship. Over the following hours, as the vessel settled and internal water levels rose, water flowed freely forward through those open hatches, section by section. The Helge Ingstad flooded completely, not because the hull was beyond recovery, not because the grounding had destroyed her, but because the internal doors were open. Post-incident analysis established that there was sufficient time and sufficient physical safety to have sent a small team below to close the forward hatches before abandonment. Had those hatches been closed, the forward sections would have retained enough buoyancy to keep the ship afloat until emergency patches could be applied. The Helge Ingstad did not sink because a tanker struck her. The Helge Ingstad sank because her crew left the doors open. What the investigation found. The Accident Investigation Board Norway, AIBN, published its final report in 2021. The findings were damning across multiple institutions. On the Royal Norwegian Navy, the service had operated with a shortage of qualified navigation officers for years. Officers were accelerated through their career progression, granted clearances earlier, with less time in the watch officer role than doctrine required. The OOW on the bridge of the Helge Ingstad that morning was a direct product of that institutional gap. On bridge training procedures, active crew training was being conducted on the bridge during transit through a busy shipping channel. The investigation found that training activities directly compromised the bridge team's navigational awareness. The Navy had no established competence requirements for instructors conducting on-bridge training. On AIS doctrine, the use of passive AIS in civilian waterways without coordination with maritime traffic authorities was identified as a systemic risk. The investigation recommended the development of formal joint guidelines for warship AIS use in civilian maritime zones. On the IPMS, 564 alarms, technically accurate, operationally useless. The investigation found no design defect, but identified a fundamental mismatch between the system's behavior at peak crisis and a human crew's ability to process information under extreme stress. On the Fridtjof TS, the operator's failure to plot the frigate's position after notification, and his subsequent forgetting of her presence, represented a human failure in a system with no redundancy for operator error. On the Voyage data recorder, the Royal Norwegian Navy had no VDR requirement for surface vessels. The investigation recommended immediate installation of black box systems on all naval ships. Without a VDR, reconstructing exactly what happened on the bridge was partially dependent on the memory of the people involved. The final numbers. The salvage operation cost $80 million. The Helge Ingstad had been valued at 1,800,000,000 Norwegian krone at the time of the accident. Building a direct replacement was estimated at $1,400,000,000 US and was declared not viable. The Fridtjof Nansen-class production line had already closed. Norway lost 20% of its entire frigate force, not to a missile, not to a mine, to a cascade of 7 failures that were individually manageable and collectively catastrophic. The cascade, in sequence, 7 failures, 12 minutes, minus 83 minutes. Helge Ingstad notifies Sola TS. The operator logs the call, does not plot the ship, minus 35 minutes. Sola TS departs the terminal. The operator tracks the tanker, still has not connected her to the unplotted frigate, minus 12 minutes. Bridge team observes the tanker's deck lights. Conclusion, stationary object on shore. AIS passive, no identification possible. Minus 5 minutes. Sola TS pilot calls VTS. The operator remembers the frigate, informs the tanker. Minus 3 minutes. Tanker calls frigate by radio. OOW believes the call is from a different vessel. Minus 30 seconds. OOW finally identifies the tanker as moving. Turn to port ordered. Too late. 0. Collision. 46-meter gash. 2 compartments open to sea. Total electrical failure. Plus 2 minutes. Hollow propeller shafts spread flooding from the generator room into the gear room and engine rooms. 5 to 6 compartments compromised. Plus 5 minutes. IPMS generates 564 alarms. Command team overwhelmed. Flooding sequence unclear. Plus 10 minutes. Ship grounds on rocks. Steering and engine control lost. Plus 112 minutes. Abandoned ship. Forward watertight hatches left open. Hours later, water flows forward through open hatches. Forward sections flood. Helge Ingstad sinks. The forensic conclusion. The Helge Ingstad collision is not the story of a warship versus a tanker. It is the story of how a system, designed with redundancy, built with 13 isolated compartments, monitored by a traffic authority, crewed by 137 professionals, can fail completely when every layer of protection collapses simultaneously. The AIS doctrine made her invisible. The VTS operator forgot she existed. The OOW misidentified a moving tanker as a stationary shore. The hollow shafts connected what were designed to be isolated spaces. The alarm system produced noise instead of signal, and the open hatches allowed water to finish what the collision had started. None of these failures, alone, was designed to sink a ship. Combined, in sequence, under pressure, at 4 in the morning, 7 failures were enough to send $500 million and 20% of a nation's frigate force to the bottom of a fjord. The Norwegian investigator reviewing the post-abandonment flooding timeline confirmed, had the forward watertight hatches been closed before evacuation, the Helge Ingstad would likely have remained afloat long enough for emergency stabilization. The ship that practical engineering had made virtually unsinkable was ultimately sunk by open doors. Remember that the next time a system tells you it has redundancy, redundancy is only as strong as the humans operating it. If this kind of forensic analysis is what you came here for, subscribe. There's more coming.